The ground shook as Captain Elena Hayes steadied herself against the cold, metal wall of the command post. The hum of the outpost's failing shields vibrated through the floor, a stark reminder of how little time they had left. Through the narrow window, the sky was a swirling mass of alien warships, their sleek, dark forms blotting out the distant stars. The Cloran Empire had arrived, and their intentions were clear: total annihilation. "Status report!" Hayes barked, her voice cutting through the tense air like a blade. Her crew moved with practiced efficiency, but there was no mistaking the fear in their eyes. Lieutenant Marcus Reed, fingers flying across his console, responded without looking up. "Shields are at 30% and dropping. We've lost 2 turrets on the eastern perimeter, and the reactor's overheating. We can't sustain this much longer, Captain." Hayes clenched her jaw, the weight of command heavy on her shoulders. They were the last line of defense, the only thing standing between Earth and the Cloran invasion fleet. But their position was untenable, and the reality of their situation was sinking in fast. Dr. Talia Monroe appeared at her side, her face pale but determined. "Captain, the medbay's overflowing with wounded. We're running low on supplies, and the injured, they're scared, Elena. They need to hear something from you." Hayes nodded, the knot in her stomach tightening. She couldn't afford to show weakness, not now. "Patch me through to all decks," she ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. The crackling sound of the intercom filled the room, followed by the anxious silence of the crew awaiting her words. "This is Captain Hayes. I know you're all feeling the strain, and I won't lie to you, the situation is dire. But we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every man, woman, and child on Earth. We hold this line, no matter what it takes. We are the shield that stands between them and oblivion, and we will not falter." A brief silence followed, then a chorus of acknowledgments crackled through the speakers. The resolve in her crew's voices gave Hayes a flicker of hope. But hope alone wouldn't save them. "Marcus, what about that alien device we recovered last month?" Hayes asked, turning to her engineer. Reed hesitated, his usually sharp eyes clouded with uncertainty. "It's still mostly a mystery, Captain. We've barely scratched the surface of its capabilities. But if I can get it online, it might just be the edge we need." "Do it," Hayes ordered, her tone leaving no room for argument. They were out of options, and this was their last gamble. Reed nodded, already moving toward the storage bay where the device was kept. As he left, Hayes turned back to the window, watching as another wave of enemy fire pounded their already failing shields. She could feel the tension mounting, the inevitability of the coming battle pressing down on her like a physical weight. Monroe's soft voice broke the silence. "Elena, what if it's not enough? What if this is the end?" Hayes didn't answer immediately, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon where Earth's reinforcements should have been. Finally she spoke, her voice low and resolute. "Then we make them pay for every inch. We fight until there's nothing left to give. And we don't go quietly." As the ground trembled beneath them, Hayes knew that the battle for their survival, and for Earth's, had only just begun. The outposts might fall, but they would ensure the Cloran Empire remembered the price of challenging humanity. The roar of the enemy bombardment was deafening as Captain Elena Hayes braced herself against the command console, her knuckles white from the strain. The walls of the outpost trembled under the relentless assault, and for a moment, it felt as if the entire structure would collapse around them. The air was thick with tension, and the acrid scent of burning circuitry filled the room. "Marcus, how much longer?" Hayes shouted above the chaos, her voice tinged with urgency. Lieutenant Marcus Reed was hunched over the alien device, his brow furrowed in concentration. Sparks flew as he made rapid adjustments to the intricate machinery, sweat beading on his forehead. "I'm close, but this thing is like nothing I've ever seen. We're running out of time." Another violent tremor rocked the outpost, sending equipment crashing to the floor. Dr. Talia Monroe, tending to the wounded in the corner, looked up with alarm. The flickering lights cast eerie shadows across her face, and the sound of distant explosions reverberated through the walls. The medbay was overflowing, and every moment counted. "Captain?" Monroe called out, her voice strained. We can't hold out much longer. The wounded, they're starting to lose hope. Hayes clenched her teeth, fighting the rising tide of despair. The situation was spiraling out of control, and the weight of her decisions pressed heavily on her shoulders. She knew they were on the brink of collapse, but surrender was not an option. We hold, she replied, her voice steady. We hold until Marcus gives us something to fight with. Reed's hands moved with renewed urgency, wires and tools scattered around him. The alien device hummed with a low, ominous energy, a sound that seemed to resonate deep within the bones. The tension in the room was palpable, each second dragging out like an eternity. And then, without warning, the bombardment stopped. The sudden silence was deafening, almost surreal. Hayes exchanged a confused glance with Monroe, her heart pounding in her chest. What just happened? She asked, barely daring to hope. Reed looked up, eyes wide with a mix of disbelief and triumph. I think I've done it, he said, his voice trembling with excitement. The device, it's creating some kind of energy field. It's disrupting their weapons systems. The room buzzed with a strange, nervous energy as the implications of Reed's words sank in. For the first time in what felt like days, there was a glimmer of hope. Hayes moved to the window, her breath catching as she saw the Cloran warships hesitating, their formidable weapons silenced by the invisible force field emanating from the alien device. Captain, this might be our only chance, Reed continued, his voice urgent. But I don't know how long it will hold. We need to strike now, before they adapt. Hayes turned to face her crew, her eyes blazing with determination. All hands to battle stations, she commanded, her voice carrying the weight of authority. We're taking the fight to them. The crew sprang into action, the outpost coming alive with a renewed sense of purpose. Monroe rushed to assist the wounded, her touch gentle but firm, while Reed focused on stabilizing the device. The tension in the air shifted, transforming into something fierce and unyielding. As Hayes prepared for the counterattack, she knew they were far from out of danger. But for the first time, the balance had shifted. The Cloran Empire had underestimated humanity's resilience, and now they were about to pay the price. The battle was far from over, but the tide was turning. And with it, so too were the fates of all who fought within the outpost's walls. The silence after the sudden cessation of the bombardment was almost unbearable, thick with the anticipation of what was to come. Captain Elena Hayes felt the hair on the back of her neck stand on end as she surveyed the tactical display, watching the Cloran warships hovering uncertainly in the blackness of space. The alien device pulsed with a strange energy, the only sound in the otherwise dead air. Report! Hayes commanded, her voice sharp as she broke the tension. Lieutenant Marcus Reed's fingers flew over the console, his eyes scanning the readouts with an intensity that mirrored the situation. The energy field is holding, he said, his voice a mix of relief and caution. Their weapon systems are still disrupted, but I can't guarantee it'll last. They're already trying to recalibrate. We need to move now, Hayes decided, her tone brooking no argument. All units, prepare to engage. The crew responded with swift, practiced movements, but the weight of what they were about to do hung heavily over them. This was more than a counterattack. It was a desperate gamble, a fight for survival with everything on the line. The Cloran Empire was a force of unimaginable power, and they were about to challenge it head-on. Dr. Talia Monroe stepped forward, her expression calm but her eyes betraying the storm of emotions beneath. Elena, if this fails... It won't. Hayes cut her off, though she knew the odds were not in their favor. She forced herself to meet Monroe's gaze, conveying a confidence she wasn't sure she felt. It can't. Reed glanced up from his console, his face pale but resolute. Captain, if I overload the device, it could give us the firepower we need, but it'll burn out in the process. It's a one-shot deal. Hayes nodded, her decision made in an instant. Do it. We don't have a choice. Reed's hands moved with precision, the room filling with the low, throbbing hum of the device as it built up power. The crew held their breath, the seconds stretching out interminably as the energy field intensified, casting an eerie glow throughout the command center. Outside, the Cloran fleet hesitated, their hesitation betrayed by the erratic movement of their ships. They had not expected resistance, least of all from a battered outpost on the edge of the galaxy. Hayes could almost feel their confusion, their growing frustration. It was a small victory, but one that would soon be tested. "Ready," Reed announced, his voice tight with anticipation. Hayes took a deep breath, steadying herself for what was to come. "On my mark," she ordered, her voice low but firm. The tension in the room was electric, the fate of everyone in the outpost balanced on a knife's edge. 3, 2, 1, fire! The alien device surged with power, a blinding flash of light erupting from its core and shooting toward the Cloran fleet. The energy waves slammed into the enemy's ships with the force of 1,000 suns, tearing through their shields and ripping their formations apart. For a moment, it seemed as if the Cloran fleet would be obliterated entirely. But then, as the light faded, Hayes saw the remaining ships regrouping, their resolve hardening. The Cloran commander, furious and humiliated, would not allow this affront to go unpunished. The reprisal was coming, and it would be swift. "Brace for impact!" Hayes shouted, her heart pounding as she watched the Cloran ships bear down on them with renewed fury. The gamble had paid off, but the battle was far from won. As the first enemy shots hit the outpost, shaking it to its foundations, Hayes knew they were in for the fight of their lives. The tide had turned, but the storm was just beginning. The outpost shook with the force of the Cloran barrage, the metallic walls groaning under the relentless assault. Captain Elena Hayes gripped the edge of the command console, her knuckles turning white. Every impact sent shudders through her, each one a reminder that their time was running out. The flickering lights barely illuminated the tense faces of her crew, who worked feverishly to keep the outpost operational. "They're breaking through our shields!" Lieutenant Marcus Reed's voice was taut with urgency as he struggled to stabilize the failing systems. "We can't take much more of this!" Hayes glanced at the tactical display, the red blips of enemy ships converging on their position like vultures circling a dying beast. They had landed a blow against the Cloran fleet, but now the enemy was closing in for the kill. She felt the weight of every life under her command pressing down on her, but there was no room for hesitation. "Not now. Prepare the last of our defenses," she ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "If we're going down, we're taking as many of them with us as we can." Dr. Talia Monroe moved to her side, her usual calm demeanor strained by the gravity of the situation. "Elena, the med bay's almost out of supplies. We've got more wounded than we can handle. If they breach the outposts—" "They won't," Hayes interrupted, her eyes hard. "Not while we're still breathing." Monroe nodded, a flicker of determination passing between them. They had been through too much to give in now. There was no surrender in their hearts, only the fierce resolve to stand their ground, no matter the cost. The outpost trembled again as another volley slammed into their shields, and the lights flickered ominously. Reed cursed under his breath, his hands a blur as he rerouted power from failing systems. "Captain, we've got maybe 5 minutes before everything goes dark. We need to act now." Hayes made her decision in an instant. "Marcus, divert all remaining power to the forward batteries. We're going to punch a hole in their formation and give them something to remember." Reed hesitated, a mixture of awe and fear in his eyes. "That's a suicide run, Captain. Then it's a good day to die," she replied, her voice unyielding. "But we'll make sure they feel it." Monroe offered a faint, grim smile. "Just like old times." Hayes returned the smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Let's give them hell." The command center erupted into a flurry of activity as the crew prepared for their final stand. The outpost's remaining weapons powered up, their hum filling the air with a sense of impending retribution. The Cloran fleet loomed closer, their ships bristling with energy as they prepared to deliver the killing blow. "Fire!" Hayes commanded, her voice slicing through the tension like a blade. The outpost's batteries roared to life, unleashing a torrent of energy that lanced through the Cloran fleet. Ships exploded in fiery blooms, the force of the blast sending shockwaves through the vacuum of space. The crew cheered, their voices filled with defiance, as they watched the enemy reel from the unexpected counterattack. But the victory was fleeting. The Cloran commander, enraged by the resistance, ordered an all-out assault. The enemy ships closed in, their weapons charging for a final, devastating strike. As the outpost's lights flickered and died, Hayes stood tall, her gaze fixed on the oncoming storm. "It's been an honor," she said quietly, her voice carrying through the darkness. The first of the enemy's shots hit home, and the outpost shook violently, but Hayes didn't flinch. She was ready. They all were. In that final moment, as the world around her crumbled, Captain Elena Hayes felt a fierce pride in her crew, in their unwavering courage. They had stood against the impossible, and even in defeat, they had proven humanity's strength. The outpost shuddered one last time, then everything went still. But their fight, their spirit, would echo across the stars, a reminder to the galaxy that humanity would never surrender.